Колеги журналісти, дякую.
Dear colleagues, dear journalists, thank you for coming and thank you to those who are viewing us online. Ukrainian Crisis Media Center continues its working day, and the topic of our roundtable discussion is forget about the Hague. Ukraine delays against the Rome Statute ratification. Our speakers shall be Margareta Cederfelt, a Member of Parliament of Sweden, Treasurer of the Parliamentarians for Global Action, PGA, Petra Bayr, a Member of Parliament of Austria, a PGA member, Mark Pritchard, an MP of the United Kingdom, member of PGA Council, and Iryna Dumych, advocate member of the Center for Civil Freedoms and Advocacy Agenda platform. Good afternoon. Starting this news conference, I would like to inform you what news are the reasons why we are here. The first thing is before the day, at the noon of the Day of Human Rights, there is a decision which was made by the Parliament of Ukraine to postpone adoption of the draft law, which was intended to provide the basis for ratification of the Rome Statute in Ukraine. This draft law 2534 that should have been amended the laws of legislative framework of Ukraine is delayed. The new section in this draft law also contains provision which is not good. This concerns the rule which the norm is saying that only after 3 years after the adoption of new constitution, amended constitution, only after 3 years after its adoption, Ukraine can ratify the Rome Statute. There is also a very strange decision of the Committee on European Integration, which suppose that the ratification of the Rome Statute is not a priority in harmonization of Ukrainian legislation with the European Union acquis communautaire. You know, this condition to become a member of the International Criminal Court is an explicit requirement to Ukraine in its European integration. I would like to emphasize that this is a condition of association of Ukraine to the EU and the only opportunity to prosecute the crimes against humanity and the war crimes in the east of Ukraine and in the occupied Crimea. And I would like to give the floor to our guests who came to Ukraine today for interparliamentary workshop which will be held in the Parliament of Ukraine today, where I hope the MPs, the guests, will be able to get answers to all their questions. Thank you very much. My name is Petra Bayr, parliamentarian.
Partisan organization. 1,300 parliamentarians from all over the world, both from national and from regional parliaments. And we have a main focus to fight for human rights. And of course, if you fight for human rights, for rule of law, for democratic governance, then it's obviously clear that you are at the Rome Statute and at the ICC quite soon. I myself am very impressed of those 64 million Ukraine people fighting for independence, for peace and for security. And due to the current struggle in the east of the country, a prompt and full ratification of the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court is crucial for the protection of Ukraine people and for supporting their fight. The guarantee against impunity will provide a deterrent effect for future crimes by Russia. Whenever space for democracy and rule of law is shrinking, then not just every person, but especially parliamentarians have the duty to fight back and to widen this space again. Strengthening rule of law through the ratification of the Rome Statute without any delay, without any waiting time for 3 years that is suggested now, really could help to build the necessary preconditions for a solid and durable peace. It is key to ending impunity for the most serious crimes under international law, especially in the Ukraine. As parliamentarians for global action, we are convinced that the time for the ratification of the Rome Statute is now, especially because Ukraine already made a good experience and accepted an ad hoc court jurisdiction under the Article 12.3 under the Rome Statute for the situation in the Donbass conflict. And we are, as parliamentarians for global action, we are ready to support Ukraine people and parliamentarians, of course, in their concrete struggle for getting part of the ICC if they wish so.
Thanks. I am Margareta Cederfelt, member of the Swedish Parliament, and I would like to start to say thanks for inviting us to Ukraine and to take part in this seminar about ICC. I would like to underline what my colleague Petra Bayr from Austria have said, that the Rome Statute, it sounds very theoretical, but it's actually a tool, a very, very strong tool to prevent from future crises and war crimes. And that's exactly what Ukraine needs today. Ukraine has, as all other countries, the free right to protect itself and to protect its people. But there needs to be a stronger legislation to do so. And the Rome Statute is one part of this. And it shouldn't be delayed any longer. The time to ratify the Rome Statute is today. And we are here from PTA to assist, to offer our knowledge and expertise and network to promote the ratification on ICC. I do also want to say that Ukraine and the EU have already an agreement that Ukraine should ratify the Rome Statute. It's in the agreement. And I would say that do this, please, Ukraine, because the Ukrainian people is worth it. And Europe is there and also supporting you. But Ukraine has to take the first step and take the leadership and stress out the importance of joining ICC. Thanks.
Thank you, Margareta, Petra. My name is Mark Pritchard. I'm a member of the UK Parliament. It's great to be back in Ukraine. I have to say that in simple terms, I think the Rome Statute of the ICC is an extension, this is my interpretation, a modern-day extension of the Geneva Convention. And there are rules and laws on international armed conflict and war. And this is a very modern interpretation of what those rules and guidelines should be. And, you know, I'm not here somebody having a go at Russia or criticizing the United States or being critical of any particular nation or telling Ukraine what it should or should not do. But Ukraine, whether it's in Europe or outside of Europe, in NATO or outside of NATO, is still a member of the international community. And as such, it has a responsibility, has a duty, but also I think it would want to be part of the international family of many, many nations that have signed up to the Rome Statute. And it's not something that should be seen as seeking to prosecute only, but it is actually something that is seeking to defend as well. So it is for protection for everybody when there is conflict and when there are acts, crimes against humanity and aggression, which is outside those international laws and norms. So we're here to listen, to learn, as well as to offer our experience as a global parliamentary network. And PGA has also been in Moscow. Whether Moscow listens to us or not, or did listen to us, is a matter for other people to decide. But we are in Asia, we're in Africa, we're in Europe, Eurasia, all over the world, Latin America, and some of those countries are more democratic than others. Some have conflicts, some do not. But I think there's a recognition. If you look at the United Nations, The Hague, where the ICC is based, the International Criminal Court, it does good work, and it does regulate, whether people acknowledge it or not, and whether countries are signatories or not. It does make a difference, and it should make a difference when there is armed conflict. So I hope that the cross-party, and it's an important point, cross-party consensus that is in the Ukrainian parliament, which is not seen on every issue, will move rapidly, whether it's a member of parliament, whether it's the constitutional committee convention of the president's office. There is agreement that the Rome Statute should be ratified. Where there is not agreement is the timetable. And there's been talk about a 3-year delay, but the fact is that if that was the case, and that's entirely a sovereign decision of Ukraine, but if that was the case, it would be highly unusual when compared to other nations around the world. It would not be something that is the norm. And I think Ukraine is wanting to be seen as a serious, measured, calm, international actor when it comes to international law and other issues. So I would encourage the President's office and the Parliament to work together to resolve the issue of the timetable in order that the international community can say, yes, Ukraine are serious about it, and this delay, this timetable conflict is not an excuse for putting it off for another day. International law cannot wait. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, I'm Jan Lucas van Hoorn. I'm the Netherlands ambassador to the ICC and the international institutions in The Hague. And I joined PGA because we support them very strongly, and as a host nation we have a huge interest that this criminal court will get its universality it has the right to. So we are here, and I follow up on what my colleagues have said to discuss whether and when Ukraine will ratify the Statute of Rome. This was one of the conditions of the association agreement, and as you know, soon there will be made an evaluation of how the progress is doing with the implementation of the association agreements, and one of the conditions was the immediate ratification of the Rome Statute. So we became quite surprised when we were confronted yesterday by the proposal by the presidential administration to not ratify for the moment the Statute of Rome, but to have some time, either 3 years or leave it open, I think in Europe it will be not very well understood that under the current conditions, as my colleagues explained, there would be a delay. I mean, it would be very tricky for your visa liberalization if already by this first step you show that Ukraine is not implementing the conditions of the association agreement, like the restructuring of the judicial sector as establishing the rule of law. Moreover, as you know, in my country, we unfortunately will have a referendum on this association agreement in April. And we are setting up a campaign, a pro-campaign, for people to vote in favor of this association agreement. But if it now turns out that already this first condition will not be met by Ukraine, it will be very hard to prove to our population that the progress here is as it should be, that there is a restructuring of the judicial sector, that there is an establishment of the rule of law. So I think it is very, very important that this is very clear to all parliamentarians and all Ukrainians what is at stake here with this new proposal. Moreover, we also think that what we have seen from the International Criminal Court, it's a court of last resort. Normally, you have complementarity, so if any crimes are committed, it should be done by the local courts, and only if after a long period the local courts are not willing or able to prosecute, it will go to the International Criminal Court. But in the meantime, it also has a very preventive way of preventing misdeeds. You have seen that in some cases, some member states, parties of the International Criminal Court, bloodshed was avoided because the executive branches in this country realized that they were risky if they would do something what has happened here in the Maidan 2 years ago. So I think for the legislative branch and for the population, the International Criminal Court gives you a protection against the executive power doing things that are not allowed anymore under international law. So it's also for the population, it will be a huge step forward to have this ratification immediately of the International Criminal Court. So we're really looking forward to have this seminar this afternoon and being able to explain to parliamentarians and the presidential administration what is at stake and why we really do hope that there will be a very sudden decision to go ahead and ratify the Statute of Rome. Thank you very much.
Дякую вам, колеги. Чи є питання?
Thank you. Colleagues, do you have any questions?
Problem. I'm from 1+1 TV channel, Ukraine, and we want to ask, you said that it would be a problem for Ukraine to protect their rights on the international arena if we don't accept this norm. So can you name what exact problems would be with, for example, Crimea situation or situation in Donbass? Because some of Ukrainian politicians talk that we are preparing all the documents for international court. So is it just the words and they will do nothing without this Rome Statute?
Well, you used the word problem. I'm not sure if that was an actual word used by anybody. But I think I understand the point you're making. Look, I think it's about setting the direction of travel for Ukraine. Is it moving to a place where it is a mature international actor when it comes to international law? I think that is what we saw in the Parliament yesterday, a cross-party consensus, a willingness in the President's office, a willingness in the legislature. It's a matter of not if, but when. But oftentimes the timetable can affect whether it is actually implemented or not. So I think there's a danger at best of technicality getting in the way, and at worst some obstruction getting in the way. What does that mean if it doesn't go through, the amendment and eventual ratification of the Rome Statute? I think it sends the wrong signal. It sends the wrong signal, as the ambassador has said, to Brussels, to Europe. It sends the wrong signal to the voters in the Netherlands. It sends the wrong signals internationally. And I think at this time in particular, with what's been going on in the last year, 2 years in Ukraine, it is a time for Ukraine, its people, its parliament, its president, its institutions, whatever their view about entering NATO or Europe or not entering, but internationally it is a time for Ukraine to be sending the right, not the wrong signals.
May I add just a sentence? Of course, Ukraine can protect its rights also without the ICC, but both international law and humanitarian international law develop, they get modern. It's the core of international law is some 1,000 years old. And it's always the questions, what modern measures do you use to protect your rights? And the ICC, of course, is a very modern, a very new, Mark mentioned it, method and possibility to protect your rights. And I think that it would bring disadvantages to Ukraine not to ratify it now and get member now.
Thanks. I agree with my colleagues here. I would like to say that Ukraine have had several years of internal war and aggression from Russia. This means that Ukraine has, it works, thanks, that joining the ICC, ratifying the Rome Statute, is a way to protect Ukraine and the Ukrainian people from further aggression from Russia. And I think this is really, really important. Ukraine needs to improve its legislation. It needs to grab all kinds of tools to reestablish its constitution, to protect its people, and also to show the rest of the world that they are a modern country, a country that takes the rule of law serious. It's time to do the step forward. Thanks.
One more thing to clarify.
Please speak to the microphone.
Okay. What kind of tools ICC give to Ukraine in the case if Ukraine will take action in this question? I mean, like in the global arena. Okay. Thank you very much.
Well, it's not so much a question of tools, it's a question of having a last resort. And that's the whole system of the Rome Statute. So what Ukraine should be doing under complementarity is prosecute the crimes itself. So the Ukrainian courts should do that. But we know that one of the conditions also of the association agreement is that you have to restructure your court system. You have to get an independent court system, and you have to get new prosecutor's office. So once that is established, it's all packaged together. Then you will have the possibilities to have the complementarity working here. If it doesn't work, in the end, you're not able or willing, the International Criminal Court is there to prosecute. Then the prosecutor, we had many stories here that Russia will sue Ukraine at the International Criminal Court. That's completely baloney. It's not possible. I mean, the only way the International Criminal Court works is that the prosecutor does research. If it finds enough evidence to go and prosecute, they have to ask for a preliminary examination to the court, to the judges. And then the judges have to decide on the facts they are provided by the prosecutor, and then they can go ahead or not go ahead. So no state party can intervene and sue another country. Russia even is not a state party, and I think for the near future will not be. Therefore it's so important Ukraine will be. But so this whole story about Russia trying to get Ukraine on this International Criminal Court prosecuted, and it's not possible. I mean, there's no legal way to do that. So it's all kind of Russian propaganda, I'm afraid, to prevent you of joining. So don't worry, that's not a possibility. And the good thing about the criminal court, and we experienced that, for example, I don't know if you followed what happened in Burkina Faso. In Burkina Faso, they had an uprising. Then the president, well, he wanted to stay for a third term, so many African countries. So in the end, the president decided that he could have shot at the population because a lot of, I mean, 1/3 of the population in the capital was running around like here on the Maidan. He decided not to do that and to leave the country because he knew that if he would have ordered to shoot at the population, he would end up before the criminal court because they are a member. So that's what I said. It gives you also protection for the legislative branch and for the population against an executive branch that might do things that are not allowed. So it makes people reflect a second time. The same case was in Kenya. You remember President Kenyatta and Vice President Ruto. President Kenyatta was before the court. This is now suspended, this case. Vice President Ruto is still before the court because in 2005 there were big riots and mass slaughters upcoming on the elections. So the next election was in 2013. There was no violence because the presidential candidates knew that the result was what happened before, that they would end up before the International Criminal Court. So it's really also a preventive measure, and I think in a country like yours, where you are emerging democracy and you're establishing the rule of law, it will be very important for your safeguard to have this protective preventive measure. Thank you very much.
Yeah, another question.
Good morning, Christina Angelmakin, Ukraine Crisis Media Center. First of all, thank you very much for taking your time and coming here to Ukraine and making this workshop on Rome Statute. I have two questions to you. First of all, we have recently heard that there has been an interim report on the crimes at Maidan from the ICCU. So I was wondering if ratification of Rome Statute will contribute to investigating the crimes at Maidan and to make the report a bit better. That's one. And two, I have just read that Russia has adopted a law that allows it to decide case by case whether it implements decisions of international courts. Do you really think ratification of Rome Statute will be a tool to protect Ukraine from external aggressor? Thank you.
Thanks. I would like to say a direct answer. When it's a question about ratification, I can hear on the question that there is a lot of rumors going around. A lot of rumors. Some might be true, but most of them are not true. ICC is not a question of demanding the Ukrainian people. It's a question about rule of law. It's a question about the legislation that's an international package that says that set the standard for a constitution that protects its people. It's also an international level to be a part of the international network where there is rule of law, where there is country who support its people, a country who protect its people from violence. And it's also, it was a question before about what is there, what's the toolbox? As I said, it's on the national level, it's on the international level, it's also on the international level a way to get to the toolbox about investigators, prosecutors, about judge at the Internet ICC. It's very, very important. And I would like also to mention, before we, PDA, had our annual forum in El Salvador ratified the ICC because they saw the value of the Rome Statute for its people. And today, it's the day for Ukraine to take a step forward for its people, for the rule of law. Thanks.
And I think also it's understandable why this conversation and many political conversations in Ukraine are seen in the context of the current conflict with Russia. But this seminar today, this workshop in the Parliament, this press conference, could have been held 3 years ago. It could be held post the conflict, which will eventually end, hopefully sooner rather than later. We all want to see peace. So it shouldn't be seen in the context of the current conflict, because the PGA has for many years been going around Parliament making the same case to many, many countries. Now, it might be that ratification of the Rome Statute does have an impact on the post-conflict trials that may or may not take place, whether they take place domestically, internationally, or both. But it's important to see this for what it is. This is Ukraine coming of age internationally as far as the international rule of law is concerned on armed conflict and war. And on modernization, if you think about it, if you go to the United Nations in New York, you'll see on the wall a replica of King Cyrus cylinders, the Persian king, the Iranian king, who all those many, many years ago set out the first charter of fundamental rights. A Persian king, an Iranian king. Look at Iran now. So the promoters of human rights change over history. The modernization of human rights and the evolution of human rights has changed and adapted over history. So we are at this point in time in history, and this is a moment in history for Ukraine to modernize its laws.
Thank you, Mr. Mark. Dear friends, are there any questions or clarifications? If there are no more questions or clarifications, thank you for coming, dear colleagues. I hope to see you here in the closest future at Ukraine Crisis Media Center. Thank you for coming again and see you soon. Bye-bye. Колеги, я нагадую, що наш наступний
I remind that our next briefing is at 11.